So, Karen, you're going to tell us a little bit about the three stages.
Yes. And as we go along, we'll give you a flavour of our clinical work to try and underpin these stages for you. So the first stage is embodiment, and we would be looking at ages between 0 and 12 to 14 months. It very much depends what you're reading, but that's an approximate sort of age. 12, 14 months is where this period ends, if you like. And so it is the earliest stage, which is rooted in sensory and bodily experiences. And you might ask why. Well, if you think about a baby and how they kind of start to explore the world and explore themselves, they're using their body. So in a sense, their body is their primary tool to be able to inform them about how they can explore and
Mm.
how safe the world is in that exploration. So the body is the primary source of learning. And that's through movement and touch and sucking and smell, but all of those elements of movement. And we're really talking here about the physicalized sense of self. You sort of spoke about it in the circle of attachment, Tara. I think it was the second phase, where actually it's about how the baby is held,
Mhm.
how the baby is contained. Um, and it is how we experience our body really in relation to another in that physical sense. So if we think about that and apply it to perhaps our thinking a little bit more, what we want to be thinking is how does the child sense themselves through their physicalized experience, their embodied experience? For example, if you have your mum who has held you in an appropriate way and
Mm.
contained you in an appropriate way, then it's likely that your embodiment is going to be appropriate, that you're going to be quite connected to every aspect of your body and you're going to be moving in a very fluid way. But if your mum has held you very, very, very tight, and every time as a baby, maybe you cry or you try and express yourself, and immediately your mum holds you tight, what you're going to get a sense of is that I don't know how to express my body because I'm not giving the room to be able to move out of this space in order to notice and feel my body. Equally, if you have a mum, primary caregiver, who is not containing you in a way that is is maybe, shall we say, a little bit loose, so the containment is quite poor, then as Tara said, we're thinking about edges here, edges of body. You will not have a physicalized sense of yourself. You will have a lack of embodiment and you won't understand how your body works.
Mm.
So what do we mean by this? Well, the example I always give, and I think we've spoken about this as well, Tara, is let's imagine you have a child in front of you and you look at them, you think, they don't seem very connected to their body. So their top half feels really, really connected. But when you look at their bottom half, it's almost as if their top half is walking ahead of their bottom half. So it looks like it's a little bit disconnected. Or you look at them and you think, gosh, their movement is quite stiff. So we would hypothesize through this framework, if you've got a child who's quite stiff in their movements, it may well have been, it's not to say it's definitely this, but it may well have been that they were held so tightly
Mm.
that their body doesn't have a sense of how it can move. Equally, we see children who are all over the place with their bodies, not contained whatsoever. And in this instance, we might hypothesize that perhaps their body wasn't contained very well.
Mm.
So the physicalized sense of self is very much about the container.
It's
No.
also it's also making me think about, babies who were, needed support when they were born, that, which again we talk a lot about. We've done webinars on, you know, trauma in the womb and early trauma, but thinking about that medical trauma on
Mhm.
infants during the embodiment phase and how that can have massive impact on a physicalized sense of self. Because there either has been over containment, under containment, or a sort of violation,
Yes.
even if it was a necessary violation,
Mhm.
um, and
Mhm.
how that can then present in the way that
Mm.
some children might express themselves through their body.
Yes. And we would also want to be thinking about um, their reflexes in this, and thinking about, did the baby crawl? How did the baby crawl? Did the baby have tummy time? Did the baby sit in a high chair? All of those things are going to help us understand this embodiment piece a little bit more, because if they've missed out on any aspects of this, then we're going to see it play out in the playroom.
Mm.
Um, Now, when we look at projection, there are two phases of projection. There is transition one, and there's also transition two. When we think about transition one, that is the first part of it. We're thinking about age approximately 12 to 18 months. So the infant has come out, or baby has come out of the embodiment phase and is now going into projection. And what this is really about is we're thinking about how the infant transitions from their body into the world. And what they're starting to do is they're starting to begin to externalize their feelings and experiences. And they start to, as they explore the world, they're starting to project these things, these feelings, their experiences onto objects and toys and, drawings, scribbles within the environment. And the reason that that's important is because at this phase, as they start to explore, they are also, it allows some distancing. Because if you can imagine, if you're starting to do this, you could become really overwhelmed as a little one. So that actually makes it a little bit safer for them as they explore. Um, it's a little bit separate. And what the object allows is the object allows those experiences to be externalized in an appropriate way. Now, from our point of view, and I know, Tara, this is sort of a question we will ask, is the transitional object is really important and supports the first phase of this projection. Therefore, a question that you might ask is, did your child have a transitional object? And if they didn't, I know certainly in my practice, sometimes I will encourage the parent to go out and get a transitional object for their child now, not their infant, but their child,
Mm.
so that it's imbued with their smells
Mm.
and the sense of feeling of them.
Mm. And that's another reason why we also argue that sometimes in the therapeutic space, children need a transitional object
Yes.
from us, from the therapeutic space, which counters the sort of fixed belief that nothing should be taken from the therapy room when you're working particularly with children who might have had relational trauma or rupture in this phase, which we're going to be looking at. We would argue that actually a transitional object is going to be potentially quite a necessary piece of helping the child to move out of stuckness of projection
Yes. And also, Tara, not only that, it's about welcoming that transitional object into the space
into
as
the
well.
space.
So,
Yeah.
because again, it's not we would encourage you to think about what would be the intent to encourage the child not to bring it into the room, particularly when we're thinking about regression, particularly
Hmm.
when we're thinking about this developmental phase. We would want to welcome that transitional object into the space. Yes, we need to look at it, look after it, and yes, we need to kind of bring it in perhaps into the space, as in, oh, Teddy, you want to come into the space? Wow, where do you want to sit today to see what George is doing? Oh, you want to sit over there? Okay. George, shall we pop Teddy up there? Then he can see everything we're going to be doing today.
Mm.
So we want to welcome it in. We want to acknowledge it. But equally, as far as we can, we want to try and keep it safe.
Well, it would be really counterintuitive to talk about the importance of the transitional object, both through EPR, through object relations, whatever your lens, and then deny its importance in the therapy room, which is probably the time where a child who's experienced lack of safety in relationship is going to need it the most. So it's just, yeah, it's just a counterintuitive. We would argue that would be counterintuitive.
I also think with a transitional object that if we think about children who are very, very isolated, who are in very, very complex and difficult environments, if the transitional object has come into the room and you've welcomed it and you've kept it safe, and that it has been part of the therapy session and they take it away and they take it home, what I feel is so important is that that transitional object has witnessed the
Mm,
child in their play and has maybe witnessed the child express certain things and reveal certain things.
mhm,
And for the child, that may be really comforting. For a child that's never believed, for a child that never feels held or witnessed. Imagine that if you brought your teddy in, your teddy has witnessed all your play, you take your teddy home, and you can talk to the teddy.
mm.
Child can talk to the teddy. And it's something about remembering and anchoring it. So transitional object is incredibly important. All right, so let's look at transition two. This is approximately age 18 months to 4 years. You might see 3 years, but approximately 4 years, depending what you're reading. And what we see here is that the play becomes much more dramatized, and stories start to appear, if you like. So the child will start to develop a bit of a narrative. It's not particularly developed because we see that more in the role phase, but the child will start to be aware of props and costumes and symbols and start to use them in a very kind of tentative, hesitant way. And this phase really is that the child is able to sort of exist separately, so a little bit more independently on their own, or they can be part of a pair, or they can be part of a small group. Now, from our point of view, projection in the transition two is really about how they make their mark in the world. And I know, Tara, you're going to look at this a little bit later, but really here, what we're thinking about is how much presence do they have in the therapy session? How are they drawing? How are they using the sand? How are they using different objects in the room and different symbols? And are they able to hold it for themselves? This might be the child where we see they're not particularly projected, where they actually never do anything for themselves in the play therapy room. Maybe they're doing everything for, I want to make this for my mum, I want to make this for my sister, I want to make this for my dad, something like that. But actually, they never do anything for themselves, or they do something and they quickly remove it.
Mhm.
This is really about how they make their mark and then how they're starting to use those symbols and how they're starting to create stories. And it would be a very basic story at this point and not very, very dramatic at all. What do I mean by that? They've got a doll's house and they've got a cat, and they say something like, the cat's going in there. There's not a sound for the cat. There's not a family of cats. That becomes more developed and more embellished once we get into the role phase. And then we see role, which is approximately 4 years of age to 7 years of age. And this is a much more advanced stage. This is where children, they start to experiment, but they also start to take on the roles. And whilst this workshop's not about the play therapy dimensions model, but we would look at quadrant 4 for that, where they're taking in a role, they want to put you into a role, they identify with the role, and the perspectives of the role are very different from their own. So there's a separateness. They can identify, this is me and this is my role. And it's more dramatic. The play is more dramatic. It's more embellished. We get sounds, we get improvisations, with anything really in the play therapy room. And the child is involving us. So often they'll put us into a role, or they'll tell us that they want this, they want that. Um, but the storytelling is much more significant and there's much more depth to it in comparison that late stage of projection.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's making me think about, um, when you were talking sort of a few slides back and sort of saying that that the EPR fits really nicely or well alongside other forms of development. You can see here how this is development of empathy, this is theory of mind, this is the capacity to feel safe enough to be able to think about someone else and step out of um, yeah, to give someone a story, to take a position on seeing from the outside in. So it's quite complex in a way, the role stage, that process, which is why sort of, Sue Jennings considers it sort of to be those later 3 years of earlier childhood, if you like. Yeah, because it requires the child to feel safe enough to be able to think about another.
Yes, yes. And although we're going to go into it shortly, you can see now that these are very separate but interconnected building blocks.
Mm,
And we can, excuse me, we can see that, if we're getting littlies, they're coming to school, let's say they've started school just after their fourth birthday, they're 4.5, we wouldn't necessarily expect a development of this role, of the drama of that role, the kind of the embellished piece, because they're just getting into it. But equally, an 8-year-old child, we would expect, if they've moved through these building blocks, we would expect them to be embodied, have projection, and have role. And
mm,
so we want to be looking, where is this missing block and where do we start the work? So really do think about the age that these children are coming into school, and also to hold these three stages in a sequential way.
mm.